In the blink of an eye, the star-studded wedding fell silent as Merrick Camden discovered his daughter Lida Winslow quietly wiping tables amid the lavish ballroom. Would he uphold his honor or rise to protect his bond with his child? The answer would change their future. Which did he choose? In the glow of a sunset painted in brilliant gold, Merrick Camden emerged in the grand hall like a legend stepping out of a fairy tale. His black tuxedo, embroidered with silver thread, clung to his regal frame, broad shoulders radiating authority, his gaze fixed on the colossal floral arch where Serena Adair would soon appear. The surrounding space shimmered as if draped in crystal. Golden flecks from the ceiling cascaded onto chandeliers, their sparkling light filtering through delicate silk curtains to dance in patterns across the marble floor. The faint scent of peonies mingled with the restless murmur of the sea outside, evoking a mood both solemn and dreamlike, like an immortal ballad rising and falling with the rhythm of human hearts. The crystalline clink of champagne flutes touching wove a solitary melody, heralding the rehearsal of the ceremony, as a procession of distinguished guests, CEOs of stature, celebrated faces, lined the aisle, shoulder to shoulder, silently gazing upward. Their eyes seemed etched into the air, time itself pausing before the final act of a drama unfolded, and then, as Merrick rested his hand on the small bell poised to announce the vows, an uneasy breeze slipped through. The sea's whisper blended with opulence, forming a mysterious murmur, a gentle warning that all was not as it seemed. From behind the resplendent red curtain, the delicate silhouette of Serena Adair emerged. She glided forward as if stepping into a dream, her white gown blooming like butterfly wings in a midnight garden, its trailing hem grazing the floor, glittering with tiny crystals. Sheer voile framed her face, accentuating eyes that sparkled with elegance, yet failed to conceal a fleeting flicker of doubt at their corners. As her subtle smile broke, the room seemed to hold its breath in a sacred moment, awaiting the words, "Please welcome the bride." Yet, just before the ceremony could reach, "Do you take?" Merrick's heart tightened, as if gripped by an unseen hand. An unforeseen detail, just enough to unsettle every perfect calculation. A small figure darted past the edge of the doorway. Lida Winslow, his 5-year-old daughter, dressed in a stark black server's uniform, her hair neatly tied, her demeanor shy, her hands trembling as she polished a flawless glass table. The sight, seemingly lost amid the roses and polished smiles, stood out with heartbreaking clarity. Seren's white gown and the ceremony's majestic glow became a backdrop to a tiny tragedy named Children Not Welcome. The moment their eyes met, father and daughter, the world seemed to freeze. In Lida's clear gaze, a reflection of confusion as she realized she'd been exposed amid the lavish waltz of adults. In that fleeting second, the murmurs and congratulations faded, giving way to a surge of shame and regret, flooding Merrick's heart. He understood then that neither the grandeur of the setting nor his commanding presence crafted happiness. Only the bond with his daughter, the truest light, could weave genuine magic. And as the trumpet for the vows remained silent, Merrick Camden stood still in the aisle, his heart swelling with a fierce longing to shield his little girl, to hold her close amid the fresh blooms, and applause. The dreamlike wedding transformed into the dawn of a profound lesson. Behind the facade of perfection lie small, yearning voices that must be heard, and only when sincere gazes meet does true magic begin. In the dim glow of the backstage lights, Merrick Camden's heart still churned with unease. He quietly tread the marble-tiled corridor, where the sizzle of pots and pans mingled with the hurried whispers of chefs. The kitchen brimmed with the heady aroma of spices, the fleeting scent of cardamom awakening every sense, deepening his turmoil. Neon light flickered across his unevenly damp eyes, reflecting a rising tide of regret. Fragmented footsteps echoed behind him, but Merrick didn't turn. He knew what he sought could not wait. In a shadowed corner of the kitchen, beside a stained stainless steel table, Lida Winslow bent to wipe away traces of her solitary moment, beads of sweat on her brow etching her longing to belong where she rightfully should. Her server's uniform, frayed and oversized for her small frame, made her seem even more timid before the meticulously groomed guests. As Merrick's footsteps reached the threshold, Lida's breath caught, the cloth slipping from her hand to the floor, her heart trembling as she recognized the familiar figure. He softly called, "Lida." His voice, like a cool stream seeping into parched earth, prompted her to lift her gaze, her clear eyes hesitating. In that moment, the kitchen fell silent, leaving only the sound of their hearts beating as one. Lida lowered her head, her lips tightening, wary of her father's stunned and pained expression. "I'm sorry, my child," Merrick Camden said, his voice breaking, touching the depths of long-buried pain. He knelt, closing the distance between them. "I didn't know you were enduring this. I truly didn't know." The invisible thread of their bond slackened, drawing them closer to a place of sincerity and unspoken words. In the glow of the kitchen's blazing hearth, warm tears rolled down Lida's cheeks, her small frame trembling as she grasped her father's hand, seeking the warmth she had long craved. Amid the bubbling of soup and the scent of baking bread, Lida choked out, "Serena Adair said I wasn't worthy of being in the same frame. I was just a prop for her." Those words cut into Merrick's heart like a blade, making him feel he had betrayed the most sacred thing. He gave a bitter laugh, his hands tightening on her shoulders. "I was wrong to believe in a perfect facade. I let appearances and glamour blind me to true feelings." In that moment, the kitchen became a sanctuary of emotion. Merrick resolved not to let his daughter pay the price for the illusions of adults. He took a deep breath, his eyes tracing Lida's innocent gestures, committing every detail to his heart. Her frail frame, her trembling lips, and her yearning gaze. "You don't have to hide anymore," he declared, his voice warm yet resolute. "You belong to this family. I'll protect you, even if it means facing the whole world." As that promise rang out, the kitchen seemed to blaze with light. The glow of the stoves no longer merely illuminated food but also lit the longing to return to a true home. Lida looked up at her father, her tears like glittering pearls, reflecting a spark of newfound trust. The invisible thread between them tightened, sealing a vow never to part. When Corbin Huxley's call echoed from the corridor's end, Merrick gripped his daughter's hand, affirming his choice. He envisioned a future free of pretense, guided only by fatherly love and sincerity. In the kitchen's warmth, amid the sweet aroma of spices, a journey brimming with hope and challenges began. Each step Merrick and Lida took marked by an unshakable love and resolve. In the stately expanse of the banquet hall, lush with candlelight and warmed by the scent of fine wine, Merrick Camden stood amid curious gazes, his heart skipping a beat as footsteps, not from polished leather shoes, echoed behind him. Those steps carried a weight he'd never felt before, not the delicate tread of his bride-to-be, nor the solemn words of investor Corbin Huxley, but the challenge of honor knocking at his door. In that moment, though bathed in the glow of shimmering crystal, Merrick's heart tightened with the realization that the powerful image he'd long cultivated could crumble in an instant. His eyes searched for Lida Winslow, desperate to ensure his promise remained intact, but she was nowhere to be seen, as he'd imagined. Instead, from the hall's edge, Serena Adair approached, her steps as silent as an autumn breeze, her white silk gown clinging to her graceful form, exuding a velvety beauty tinged with coldness. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but it held no warmth, only a challenge veiled beneath her aristocratic aura. Merrick felt the pressure of the moment. He stood not just before a crowd, but as a future husband poised to sacrifice his daughter to preserve Seren's honor. As Seren offered a delicate nod, the room seemed to freeze. The guests' breaths softened, hands clutching champagne flutes danced on glossy surfaces, and whispers rose and fell in waves. In that instant, the call to resume the ceremony paled against the unspoken challenge. "Will you continue this game after choosing your daughter?" Merrick locked eyes with Seren, his feet steady on the line between power and fatherhood. Bowing to the guests, he cast a fleeting glance at the VIP seats, where Corbin Huxley sat with poised elegance, his scrutinizing gaze weighing Merrick's choice. With each passing second, the image of his small daughter kneeling in her server's uniform burned vividly in his mind, making him realize that honor could not outweigh a child's happiness. He had long believed that reputation and duty to shareholders were paramount, but now his promise to Lida echoed in his heart like an eternal melody, affirming that true honor was inseparable from love. The crowd still marveled, but Merrick paid no heed to their judging eyes. He stepped towards Serena, his voice resounding like a war drum. "We'll continue the ceremony, but on my terms." Serena's polished arrogance surfaced as she raised a brow, her eyes glinting with dissent. She slowly curled her lips. "Are you sure you want to do that?" Each word was a slender blade, piercing the armor of his perfect image, but Merrick stood firm. In that moment, he was not only shielding the timid girl hiding behind the curtain, but also proving a clear truth. True honor is tied to protecting what matters most. Merrick took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and placed Lida's image on the scales of justice before hundreds of guests. He smiled, resolute. "I won't let my daughter vanish in this splendor." The hall held its breath. Then an unexpected wave of applause erupted, endorsing his courage. As the rhythmic beat of the orchestra's drums began, the applause merged with Merrick's heartbeat, affirming his belief that the test of honor was not a choice between image and love, but a way to uphold a father's duty without losing himself. The opulent stage resumed its rhythm, but for Merrick, that moment etched a new chapter, one of resolve to protect his family and uphold honor with a sincere heart. In the frozen moment when the backstage corridor seemed to hold its breath, Merrick Camden faced Serena Adair, his gaze piercing through her mask of pride like an arrow. Behind them, silk curtains swayed with each gust of cold wind, a constant reminder of the fragile divide between a perfect facade and raw truth. The wooden walls cast a hazy shadow, and light from the grand hall's chandeliers spilled through a window, streaking across Serena's cold face, sharpening her regal poise. "You dare disrupt the ceremony?" Serena's voice cut through like a slender sword, just sharp enough to deepen the tension in the air. Every word was polished, not a single harsh breath escaping her tightly pressed lips. She stepped forward, her heels clicking rhythmically on the cold stone floor, each tap a silent challenge. "She's not part of this performance." Merrick stood unshaken, his broad shoulders resolute, his eyes unwavering. The light caught the corner of his lips, tracing a faint curve, not a smile, but an unyielding resolve. "Lida Winslow is no mere extra. She's my flesh and blood." His voice rang out, strong enough to drown the clack of heels and the faint clamor of the crowd beyond the curtain. Each word radiated power, a father's honor confronting fleeting fame. The silence that followed stretched as if time were trapped between two tides of emotion, ambition and perfect imagery on one side, pure fatherly love on the other. Serena drew a sharp breath, the soft rustle of her silk gown chillingly crisp. She raised a brow, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and surprise as she realized Merrick was willing to sacrifice everything for his small daughter. "You'd ruin it all for a child?" she asked, her voice hoarse as if the words had been forcibly restrained. The hot rush of her blood pulsed through each syllable, though her exterior clung to calculated calm. Merrick stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to mere steps, their breaths mingling. "Not ruin," he replied softly, "but redeem. A man can lose everything, but if he loses his daughter, there's nothing left to defend." The wooden floor creaked, mirroring Serena's racing heartbeat. She turned away, her gaze catching the shimmering curtain where the flicker of the bustling crowd lingered, but she knew she couldn't keep her back turned forever. "If you don't return to the wedding, don't blame me for telling everyone why," she said, each word icy. With that, she yanked the curtain aside and strode into the main hall, leaving Merrick alone in the quiet corridor. The corridor's lights dimmed as the doors slammed shut, giving way to his heavy breaths. Merrick closed his eyes, inhaling deeply to swallow the surge of emotions, then opened them with a warm yet resolute smile. His hand brushed the small badge in his breast pocket, where a photo of Lida's shy smile rested. It was more than a keepsake. It was the inspiration that steadied him for any battle. Without glancing side to side, Merrick told himself that a father's honor outweighed all fleeting glory. He turned on his heel, striding toward the banquet hall, where Corbin Huxley and the guests awaited, ready to declare his choice. Behind him, the curtains stirred faintly, as if affirming that this final confrontation was not a clash between individuals but a reckoning between false images and true love. As the grand hall's doors swung open, Merrick Camden gently guided Lida Winslow into the opulent space, as if they were stepping into a drama of 1,000 stars unfolding on a magnificent stage. Crystal chandeliers hung like giant dewdrops from the high ceiling, their glistening light grazing Lida's hair, transforming her into a small, warm ember amid a sea of people. The applause hushed, giving way to the synchronized footsteps of father and daughter on the polished wooden floor, each sound ringing like a bell heralding the night's most pivotal moment. The VIP guests, from Corbin Huxley in his silver thread suit to influential industry figures, fell silent, their eyes a mix of surprise and empathy as they beheld Lida's astonished face. Her clear gaze followed her father's every step, sparkling with fragile yet fierce hope, like a flower poised to bloom in frost. The air conditioning's breeze carried the scent of rosemary and vanilla from the dessert table, creating a sweet undercurrent that heightened the gravity of the moment. Merrick stopped at the center of the hall, where a red carpet stretched like a path to his heart. His eyes swept over the rows of guests, their faces upturned, the soft sighs of curious gazes blending with whispers that surged like waves. The room grew so still that he could hear the rustle of his suit, the faint flutter of Lida's silk dress in the breeze, and the fervent beating of his heart beneath his tuxedo. With a voice that resounded like a war drum rallying troops, Merrick spoke. "Tonight, before your eyes, I declare that—" Each word struck the listeners' hearts, shattering the veneer of glamour to reveal a sincere desire. "To protect his beloved daughter," he continued, his tone firm yet warm, "I choose Lida Winslow above all splendor, above every glittering photograph, and above even the sweetest congratulations." In that instant, the hall erupted. Some held their breath, others pursed trembling lips, and eyes hidden behind sunglasses suddenly glistened with tears. The first clap fell like a gentle droplet, touching Lida's heart, her lips tightening in surprise, her eyes brimming with emotion. The applause grew, at first soft like a passing breeze, then swelling into a roaring tide, each wave affirming that a father's love deserved celebration. A few guests rose, clapping fervently, their eyes filled with respect for Merrick, as if he had unveiled a lesson in compassion amid a fleeting world. Yet some tilted their heads, their skeptical gazes questioning whether this choice would topple the perfect image of a prestigious family. In a shadowed corner, Corbin Huxley nodded slowly, his lips pressed, a glint of admiration in his eyes, a sign that values beyond wealth were the true essence of honor. Amid the storm of emotions, Lida gripped her father's hand, her eyes shining like morning dew on a rose. She trembled slightly, but her small feet stood firm, feeling Merrick's warm breath and steady heartbeat. The room seemed to pause again, with only the scattered claps of lingering guests mingling with the footsteps of father and daughter, a symphony of love and loyalty. As the applause faded, Merrick bowed to the crowd, his gaze meeting Lida's, conveying a silent whisper. "We've passed the first test." Then he guided her toward the exit, leaving behind the harbor of splendor and its hollow glow. The chandeliers continued to sparkle, but the grandiose applause was gone, replaced by a reverent silence, marking the moment in the grand hall where a father's love triumphed over all trials. In the quieting moment, Merrick Camden bent slightly, taking Lida Winslow's trembling hand, the crystal chandelier above casting dewdrop-like light that etched their faces in a glowing tableau. The surrounding space seemed to still. The earlier cacophony, the orchestra's hum, the guests' murmurs, the clink of glasses, faded, yielding to the warmth radiating from their clasped hands. Merrick knelt, aligning his gaze with his daughter's innocent eyes, where a fragile yet steadfast trust shimmered. The air conditioning's breeze teased the silk curtains behind, painting a shimmering canvas of countless crystal facets. The dreamy scent of vanilla and peonies wafted through, as if to soothe the wounded souls of father and daughter. Lida closed her eyes tightly, leaning into her father's shoulder, struggling to hold back tears, the remnants of fear from hiding in the shadows of prestige. But now Merrick's broad shoulders became a steadfast shield, convincing her that the world could be warm again. "I'm sorry, my child." Merrick's choked voice rose like the cadence of a lullaby. He gently stroked Lida's hair, each strand gleaming like silver thread in the light. "I was so caught up in the illusion of success that I forgot you needed me more than anything." His words, like a cool stream, quenched the long-parched thirst in Lida's heart, planting a seed of hope. Lida opened her clear eyes, tears clinging to her lashes, her lips trembling but curling into a shy smile. "I just want to be with you, Dad," she whispered, her small voice brimming with sincerity. The flickering candles on the banquet tables reflected the glistening tear in her eye, like a tiny crystal holding pure happiness. "I don't want to hide anymore." In that moment, Merrick's heart melted. He pulled his daughter close, letting her feel his steady breath and even heartbeat. Each tender gesture spoke louder than words. He would never let her suffer again. At the main hall's entrance, Serena Adair appeared, not with her former haughty disdain, but with eyes revealing surprise and conflict. Her white silk gown grazed the granite floor, its waves rippling like an autumn breeze's whisper. She paused, observing the rare private moment between father and daughter, an invisible guest listening to their duet of genuine emotion. In the hushed stillness, a soft cough from Seren broke the silence, drawing attention. Merrick loosened his embrace, gently wiping Lida's eyes, then stood tall, facing her. The air seemed to pause again, awaiting the next move. "You," Seren began, her voice hoarse with a hurried breath, "you really care about her more than anything?" Her question wasn't a challenge, but a search for truth. Merrick offered a gentle smile, his warm gaze unwavering on Lida. "Yes, nothing matters more than my daughter," he replied, his voice filled with resolve and love. In that instant, the invisible wall separating him from Seren seemed to dissolve, leaving only undeniable sincerity. Lida looked at her future stepmother, hesitant but with eyes glowing with newfound trust. From a distance, Corbin Huxley nodded subtly, as if affirming that Merrick's choice was not just personal, but a testament to values transcending fame. The backstage of the wedding night grew warmer than ever. There, amid sweet scents and soft light, father and daughter found each other again, and a flame of hope was kindled, ready to spread to every path ahead. As the grand hall's doors closed behind them, Merrick Camden and Lida Winslow stepped out, his hand clasping hers like an anchor in a stormy sea. The crystal chandelier's glow lingered faintly behind, now just a fading halo, yielding to the star-filled night sky, a vast expanse stretching before them, beckoning them into a new journey where freedom awaited. The salty breeze from the Hampton Sea teased Lida's hair, carrying the scent of brine and fleeting jasmine, evoking a sense of openness and liberation. Lida's small feet stumbled on the gravel path leading to the lush lawn, but fear no longer gripped her. Instead, she felt the thrill of breathing free air, unburdened by judgmental gazes. The moonlight traced a silver edge on their hair like delicate silk draped over a moment of transition, where the opulent past was left behind and the present surged forward. Merrick leaned down, brushing his daughter's hair, his eyes gleaming with budding pride. She had risen, passed through the veil of pretense, and stepped into the real world with her own chosen path. In the distance, under the glow of a front-yard lamppost, Serena Adair's silhouette appeared like a faint shimmer. She paused, silently watching them. Stripped of her haughty facade, her face betrayed a mix of disappointment and admiration. Her white gown pooled on the ground, like cold water flowing backward, sketching the chagrin of a once perfect image now cracked. She seemed smaller under the sea of stars, her eyes tinged with the somber hue of a cloudy night. Yet perhaps she too recognized what Merrick had affirmed. Some values cannot be measured by fame or hollow glamour. In the quiet night, Seren's faint call broke through. "Merrick!" It was no longer a challenge, but a tentative plea, seeking what held him fast. Merrick paused, turning back. His gaze held no hatred, only gentle judgment and compassion. He nodded slightly, a wordless farewell, then guided Lida forward into their future. The door had closed, and behind it no one could sway the anthem of their bond. Before them, the gravel path led to the shore, where silver waves crashed against rocks, the sea's whispers soothing and coaxing. Lida suddenly let go of her father's hand, running to the water's edge, letting the cool waves lap at her ankles, awakening her senses. She turned back, eyes sparkling, her voice innocent. "Do you think we'll live free forever, Dad?" Merrick smiled, his warm voice rising in the night. "Freedom isn't a destination, my love. It's how we choose to live each day." High above in the mansion, Corbin Huxley watched through a large window. The powerful investor nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips, as if confirming that even the tightest bonds could be severed by the strength of love and loyalty. He turned slowly, his knowing gaze lingering on their steps, then returned to the warm glow of the hall, where memories crumbled. Under the starry sky, Merrick and Lida held hands, drifting beyond the reach of grandeur. In their shared breath, they found a land of freedom, unburdened by the need to uphold appearances, driven only by the honest desire to be together, to live for each other. In that moment, the world simplified, just a father and daughter, the sea breeze, the murmuring waves, and the ocean's fervent whisper, blessing a new life of freedom, sincerity, and hope. In the rosy glow of dawn, Merrick Camden sat by the shore with Lida Winslow, the rhythm of waves crashing against the rocks a reminder that every choice, however small, weaves its own melody. In the open air, where salty breezes intertwined with the scent of sea and jasmine, father and daughter shared the most honest of gazes, a space free of facades or hollow promises. Through 6 chapters of their journey, from the gilded wedding doors atop the Hampton's cliffs to the stifling backstage kitchen, from tense confrontations with Serena Adair to the tender moment when an apology bridged 2 hearts, they had learned a profound lesson about love and honor. True value cannot be measured by fleeting glamour. Lida leaned her head on her father's shoulder, her eyes, still misty from the previous night, seeming to melt into the sunrise. "Dad," she whispered, "do you remember your promise that I'm always the most important?" Her soft voice, like a breeze's murmur, drew a smile from Merrick as he gently stroked her hair. "Always," he replied, his warm tone an invisible thread binding their bond. In that magical moment, the blue sea brimmed with hope. Each wave echoed a song of resolve, affirming that choosing genuine love invites the world's trust in return. Behind them, a sailboat glided lightly across the water, a reminder that life is like a voyage, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, but with sails tethered to the mast of true affection, even gales lead to safe harbors. Merrick thought of Corbin Huxley, the silent investor whose knowing gaze understood that it's not always the card of power, but the card of love that wins life's game. In those investors' eyes, Merrick saw support not just for wealth, but for a nobler value, responsibility to those we cherish. Far off on the dunes, Serena Adair's silhouette lingered by the shore, silently watching the pair, her frail form, white gown dusted with sand, testified that even the most perfect image can dissolve under the tides of truth. Yet in this quiet moment, perhaps Serena too grasped the lesson of true love. Respect, acceptance, and sharing forge bonds, not fame or power. Under the rising sun, Merrick slowly stood, rolling up his trousers, and with Lida walked along the soft sand, their footprints a script etched on the sea's heart. They didn't look back to the opulent past or shy from worldly temptations, but chose the path of freedom. Freedom to be themselves, to love unconditionally, and to protect values beyond any price. As they faded into the morning light, the breeze whispered a blessing. Hold fast to sincerity, and love will guide the way. Behind them, the mansion glowed as brightly as before, now just a backdrop to a closed tale. Before Merrick and Lida lay a new canvas of life, painted in simple yet vibrant hues. Smiles, laughter, the warmth of kinship, and the eternal lesson that true love is the greatest magic. Amid the waves' gentle roar, that song lingered, a symphony of lessons and love, inviting every heart to step toward the horizon of freedom. Listening to the journey of Merrick Camden and Lida Winslow, I truly felt their pain and witnessed the power of a father's love triumphing over all the glitz. Thank you for joining Millionaire and Heart Stories. See you again in stories that touch the heart.